Stephen Etchington here from Westmonster, and today I'm reporting from Fishing for Leave at Conservative Party conference. We will be talking to the founder and other members about why they think that they have been betrayed by Theresa May and what they think the European Union has done to their industry. So, you are the founder of Fishing for Leave, Aaron. Now, what do you think about the government's current fishing policy?
Absolutely disastrous. Well, it's disastrous because of the wider Brexit context. The white paper has some noble aspirations in it, but the problem is the proof's going to be in the pudding. And the government's wider strategy towards Brexit and the capitulation of Chequers renders the fisheries policy that they propose mute, because we're still going to be bound to the EU, we're still going to be bound to the common fisheries policy, and after the 21-month transition, the EU can enforce any detrimental legislation it pleases. We will have to obey that under good faith, because that's what good faith means, full obedience to that law, and that means they can cull our fleet. And if they can cull our fleet, they have every incentive to do so, because under international law, if a nation, which we will be again officially, cannot catch its own resources, it must give the surplus to its neighbours. So the EU has every reason to wipe our fleet out in 21 months, and then they can turn around and say, you can't catch your resources, so we have the lot. So the transition in Chequers is an existential threat. We're on a knife edge. We can have a really bright future, or we could end up decimating what's left of an industry.
And what is it that you're calling for the government to do?
The government needs to walk away. It absolutely needs to walk away. It needs to chuck Chequers. A free trade agreement like Canada would be preferable. Nobody would disagree with that, but that's what all Europe was meant to be about, trading, just as we do with other nations in the world. It's not meant to be about political union. Chequers is political union, membership is political union, and we need to be clear of both to get our industry back, revert to international law. That gives us all our waters, all our resources automatically, and then we can manage it sustainably like Norway, like Iceland, and like Faroe. So the government now has got to chuck Chequers and walk away. Free trade agreement, fair enough, but anything else, an absolute no.
Some Remainers say that your industry is so small that it's irrelevant and we shouldn't even bother talking about it in the Brexit negotiations or use it as a bargaining chip to get other things like free trade agreements, etc. What do you say to that?
Well, never have a bunch of people hated their own country so much as the Remainers. And the sad thing is that they miss is they besmirch the industry that it isn't worth very much. Well, the reason it's been so denuded is because of their beloved EU. If we get back control of our waters, our industry could double. When that goes through to process value, which is what's going to be the wider spread in coastal communities, you're looking at an industry worth about £8 billion a year. That would be about 22,000 fishermen, about 100,000 ancillary jobs, and when you spread that out to the wider communities, you're talking in surplus of 100,000 people. So it's no small industry at all, especially for areas that have very little else in rural and coastal communities. The one thing I would ask Remainers when they say your industry is only 0.5% is, how much is your job worth to the economy?
Do you think politicians, are looking out for British fishermen over the last sort of 40 years?
I think if it hadn't been for our strenuous efforts with Fishing for Leave, that fishing wouldn't be one of the acid tests of Brexit. There's a huge thanks got to be given to some prominent politicians like Owen Paterson, Nigel Farage, for their unceasing endeavours to right what is a terrible injustice, not just in the fishermen themselves, but the British people. It's their resource. So it's an acid test. The government's paying lip service to it, but as we said with the fisheries white paper, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And if they don't chuck Chequers, if they don't revert back to international law, where we automatically repatriate our own resources, they'll have betrayed British coastal communities a second time.
So we've got Paul Lyons here from Fishing for Leave. You represent Fishing for Leave in East Anglia.
In East Anglia, yes.
And you're a fisherman yourself?
I am a fisherman, yes. I've been a fisherman since I left school. I've done other jobs, but fishing is the mainstay of my income now.
And what do you think about the European Union's, fisheries policy?
Well, the common fisheries policy got to go. It's been a disaster from the concept of the common fisheries policy. And we can only wait to dump that, because it hasn't worked. It's cost the environment everything. We're very concerned that when we get our waters back, that if we have to stick with a transition period for the common fisheries policy, it's got to be curtains for a lot of fishermen. They will not be able to sustain that loss.
Do you think Chequers is a betrayal of British fishermen?
Yes, I do. I think we've got to dump that as quick as we possibly can and get on to the World Trade Deal, or the Canadian deal at least. But Chequers is going to keep us joined into that, and there's no references about whenever we're going to leave it or how that's going to pan out for us. It's just seemed a complete fudge.
Do you think the government has sold out your industry?
Well, I'd like to think they haven't. and I'd like to think that they do bear us in mind, because our coastal communities really need the revival of their fishing industry back. But if they don't get that, God knows what's going to happen to our coastal communities, because we are all sitting waiting on tenterhooks to get our industry back. And if the government have got the audacity to sell us down the river, well, they're going to have a lot of angry people to deal with.
Who do you blame for the fact that your industry has been decimated?
Well, I blame a weak government. They've always fielded weak politicians to go and negotiate a good deal for us. Now, they come back and say they've got a good deal, but they've been weak, because our fish has gone down and gone down and gone down till virtually our port, our fishermen had at times 40 kilos of fish to catch a month, as I reminded Elizabeth Truss. But nothing's going to happen until we're out and clear and get our own waters back and get the fish that live within them, so we can rebuild our fleets of boats and we can really go to town and have a sustainable industry out of this.
Michael Gove says that Chequers does deliver for British fishermen. I mean, he does say that we are going to leave the common fisheries policy. What do you say to that?
It don't say when, and that's a promise. Well, they've promised us lots of things in the past. I've been promised things from Europe for the last 30 years, but they've decimated our industry, and our industry is on its knees now. That's had its heart ripped out and thrown. Now, I don't believe what anyone promises. I want to see it written down on paper, and I want us out, and I want us out of that common fisheries policy on March the 29th, over.
What has happened to the fishing industry from the European Union's perspective, and what has the European Union done to your industry?
Killed it. Absolutely destroyed it. I look at Iceland and Norway and how well they're doing, being out of the EU, and then I look at places like Holland that are thriving because they're taking our fish. We've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do the right thing for our fishing communities. We want it back, and there will be a lot of hassle if she does not deliver that. She promised us that no community would be left behind. That was a quote from her, and I hope she's not now going to backtrack, because I really support Theresa May, but just recently everything she's done, she's backtracked. Now I hope she doesn't on the fishing.
Have you personally seen your fishing community being destroyed by the European Union's common fisheries policy or whatever?
Yes, finished. We now have 12 small boats, small 10-metre boats. In its peak we had 185. We've still got an industry, still got a shout auction every morning, but now Lowestoft's been chosen to be the renaissance of the UK fisheries. I was spearheaded about 6 months ago by the ex-director of DEFRA, Rodney Anderson. The government is helping to pay for a feasibility study to bring it all back. You know, my communities are starving. People want to put bread on the table and pay their mortgages and have a job, and we have a chance to be great.
Do you think politicians care about your industry?
No, not very many. There's a few that do. I mean, yeah, I mean, my MP's not too bad, Peter Aldous, but I think they care, but have they got the guts to do the right thing? You know, they worry about their own jobs too much, where their job should be to be creating jobs in different towns. That's what worries me.
Thank you so much for watching this Westmonster report from the Fishing for Leave event at Conservative Party conference. If you want to help us out, then you can click the link in the description to donate to Westmonster and help us get outside the bubble.